Many people have heard of the case we're going to talk about today, but there's a couple of important pieces of information that people often get wrong. The first is the belief that a horrific murder of a child under CPS oversight with a detailed history is an anomaly. That's sadly not the case. Now, many people recognize that the amount of people who tried to help the poor boy we're discussing today are more than you could comfortably fit in the room I'm sitting in right now, as well as the fact that a total of 60 calls were made to the police and to various social services to try to save him. And yes, that does not sound real, but as nightmarish as it sounds, it did happen. This happens more often than you think, and this channel is proof of that. And one of the worst parts of doing this is that we can only cover the victims that are more than a small blurb in the newspaper. Yes, that's right. Most murders, even those involving children, end up being nothing more than a small obituary or a paragraph on a news website. This first case we're discussing, he almost was nothing more than a blurb in a newspaper. The second thing people often get wrong with this case is that despite the catastrophic negligence of the Los Angeles County Department of Children and Families, the average person believes the spokespeople from LA County who claim that they would fix every problem in their system and that a case like this would never happen again. But sadly, it did happen again. It happened at least 2 more times that we know of, inside a county that should have known better, a county that openly told us that it knew better. We will talk about those 2 other times later in this video, but first, let's dive into the case that opened mine and Jurgi's eyes to the systemic issues inside of the departments put in place to protect children. This is the story of Gabriel Fernandez.
Gabriel Daniel Fernandez was born on February 20th, 2005 in California to parents Arnold Contreras and Pearl Fernandez. The couple had a total of 4 children together, including little Gabriel. According to sources, Pearl abandoned her newborn at the hospital 3 days after he was born. Shortly after, Gabriel was placed in the care of Michael Lemos Carranza, his great-uncle on his mother's side, and his partner, David Martinez. In recent years, Gabriel Fernandez has become something of a household name thanks to LA Times reporter Garrett Therolf, who risked everything to tell Gabriel's story. He came across Gabriel's name and age in a homicide docket and wondered why there wasn't any information on this boy. So he started digging, and he faced an incredible amount of pushback. Workers from inside LA County were afraid to go public due to the risk of losing their jobs or potentially facing criminal prosecution. But thankfully, one person was willing to come forward. And the information that we're about to cover is only possible thanks to Garrett and the whistleblower for coming forward even despite the serious risk of doing so. In 2009, when Gabriel was 4 years old, he was placed into the custody of his grandparents due to his grandfather's objection to the boy being raised by 2 men in a relationship together. There had also been allegations that the couple had been essaying Gabriel, although this is never proven to be true, and was possibly a ploy to remove the boy from their custody. Gabriel remained in his grandparents' care until 2012. Despite objections from the family regarding Gabriel's well-being, his mother, Pearl, and her new boyfriend, Isaro Aguirre, regained custody to gain welfare benefits. At the time, Gabriel was just 8 years old.
Pearl Cynthia Fernandez was born on August 29, 1983 to parents Robert and Sandra Fernandez. She had a complicated upbringing with her father in and out of jail for the bulk of her childhood. Pearl claimed that her mother was a violent woman who did not love her. According to Pearl, she started drinking and using crystal by the age of 9, and by 11, she ran away from home. She never made it to high school, having dropped out by the time she was in 8th grade. Pearl claimed that her teenage years were rife with violence as well as SA from her family members. For example, she claimed that as a teenager, her uncle had attempted to assault her and that she had been held hostage for days by a gang who took turns on her. This led to a hospitalization and dark thoughts from Pearl, who confessed to dealing with ideation at this time. In 2011, Pearl took a cognitive ability test. She placed within the 3rd percentile in the verbal comprehension portion of the test, which was on par with a typical 2nd grade student. She was also diagnosed with a number of severe mental health issues, including a depressive disorder, an unnamed developmental disability, and a possible personality disorder, as well as PTSD. According to clinical psychologist Dr. Deborah Miura, Pearl was virtually unable to use thoughts to guide her behavior and control her emotional reactions. According to family members, including her own aunt, Elizabeth Carranza, Pearl had a difficult time accepting responsibility for her actions and enjoyed falsely portraying herself as a victim. She claimed that many of her romantic partners, including Isaro, were violent with her, but according to her aunt, this simply was not the case. Pearl was the only one who was actually violent and controlling and had pending charges for threatening to stab the father of her 4 children. She also had a problem with substance use and enjoyed using oxycodone and Norco, both of which are opioids. Her boyfriend, Isaro Tony Aguirre, was born on June 13, 1980. The time of our story, Pearl and Isaro had been together about a year prior to regaining custody of Gabriel. Isaro had dropped out of school after being forced to repeat 2 grades and was working as a caregiver and a driver at the Woodland Park Retirement Hotel. There, his co-workers referred to him by his nickname Shaggy. According to his former boss, Susan Weisbarth, Isaro was quiet, down-to-earth, nice person, always willing to help. He had worked for Woodland Park for 3 years and was described as patient and loving and would often change the adult diapers of elderly residents at the facility. Isaro was well loved by his residents. According to his co-worker, Shirlene Mill, Isaro would often take scenic routes while driving his residents around so they could check out views other than the California freeway. At the time of our story, Isaro was working as a security guard for AVL Private Security, where he was posted up at the Vallarta Market in Palmdale. Now, after hearing all of this, one would think that Isaro was just a huge teddy bear. That's what makes what happened next so shocking.
Gabriel would go on to live with his mother and her boyfriend for a total of 8 months. During that time, young Gabriel would suffer unimaginable violence and torture at the hands of the couple. He was beaten regularly, which would result in his bones being broken. This included having his teeth knocked out with a baseball bat. He was covered in burn marks that were inflicted with an array of items, including lit cigarettes, lighters, and heated-up metal spoons. He was forced to consume cat litter, feces, spoiled or expired foods, and when he couldn't hold any of these items down, he was forced to eat his own vomit. Gabriel endured being pepper sprayed. He was forced to wear women's clothing to school. He was forced to take cold showers. He was shot repeatedly with a BB gun all over his body, including to his face and groin. To top it all off, Gabriel was forced to sleep bound and gagged in a small cupboard locked with a set of handcuffs. He didn't even have a real bed. According to Gabriel's siblings, Pearl and Isaro would laugh while being violent with a little boy. Allegedly, Gabriel was mistreated because Isaro believed that the 8-year-old liked boys. While in the cupboard, the only real food Gabriel had access to was pieces of banana that his siblings would give him in secret through the crack in the cupboard doors. During this time, Child Protective Services became involved in the couple's life due to the fact that Gabriel was going to school battered and bruised. This would include Barbara Dixon, a licensed marriage and family therapist from Hathaway Sycamore's Child and Family Services. Barbara oversaw in-home counseling sessions for both Gabriel Fernandez and Anthony Avalos, whom we'll discuss later in the story. Barbara believed Pearl when she told her that Gabriel's black eye and bruises on his ankles and wrists were the result of a bicycle accident. And even after she allegedly grew suspicious of the family, she never escalated the matter to the DCFS hotline, despite being a mandatory reporter. Now, it's also important to talk about a particular home visit that was conducted by the Antelope Valley Youth and Family Services that could have changed the course of things for little Gabriel, but unfortunately, the social worker didn't do her job either. She didn't even document any of Gabriel's injuries. Upon leaving the family home, Pearl presented the social worker with a series of notes that Gabriel had written, had messages on them, indicating that he wanted to remove himself from this earth. Rather than taking them seriously, the social worker trusted Pearl's words that Gabriel was doing just fine, wasn't presenting any current signs of ideation, and wasn't a danger to himself or others. Things came to a head on May 22, 2023. Allegedly, Gabriel had failed to pick up his toys after he was done with them, which led to the couple beating him. Except, this time, Gabriel wasn't breathing. Pearl called 911 and emergency services were dispatched to the couple's apartment located in a complex on East Avenue Q10 in Palmdale. First responders found Gabriel laying naked on the floor, covered in injuries. Rather than provide them with any useful information, Isaro again doubled down on insisting that the 8-year-old Gabriel liked boys. Gabriel was rushed to the Children's Hospital Los Angeles, where doctors declared the little boy brain dead. Gabriel Daniel Fernandez passed away 2 days later, on May 24, 2013. At autopsy, his cause of death was determined to be blunt force trauma, neglect, and malnutrition. His manner of death was a homicide. Gabriel's body was later cremated, and his ashes were provided to his family members.
Just a day prior, on May 23rd, both Pearl Fernandez and Isaro Aguirre were arrested in connection with Gabriel's death and were charged with first-degree homicide with a special circumstance for torture. Prosecutors were quick to announce that they planned to seek the death penalty for both defendants. In a bid to avoid the death penalty, Pearl decided to take a plea deal on February 15, 2018. As part of the agreement, the death penalty would be removed from the table, and Pearl would plead guilty in exchange for life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. Isaro, on the other hand, decided to plead not guilty to his charges, and his case went to trial, prosecuted by both Deputy District Attorney Jonathan Hatami and Deputy District Attorney Scott Yang. Prosecutor Hatami will become something of a household name as our story progresses. Now, many felt that the prosecution should have classified Gabriel's death as a hate crime due to the fact that Isaro would often beat Gabriel because he thought that he liked boys. According to Prosecutor Hatami, they chose not to pursue a hate crime charge for strategic reasons. Jury selection began in September of 2017 and consisted of 7 women and 5 men. At trial, Isaro's attorney John Allen painted his client as a kind and compassionate man with a clean criminal record before meeting Pearl, while Prosecutor Hatami portrayed him as simply pure evil, who deserved the death penalty even though it, and I quote, doesn't even compare to what he did to Gabriel. On November 14, 2017, the 12 jurors began their deliberations, which went on until the following afternoon. Ultimately, Isaro Aguirre was found guilty on all counts. The sentencing phase began December 11th of the same year. It appeared the jury was deadlocked, but on December 13th, they recommended capital punishment, and the judge accepted the recommendation. At their joint sentencing hearing on June 7, 2018, Pearl shared the following apology directed towards her family and children.
I want to say I'm sorry to my family for what I did. I want to say I'm sorry for this, what happened. I wish they were alive. Every day I wish that I made better choices. I'm sorry to my children, and I want them to know that I love them. And I hope one day they will forgive me. And I hope one day they would come to their sense and come to me. I wish I could have saved Gabriel.
But thankfully, Superior Court Judge George Lomelli wasn't moved and had harsh words for both Pearl and Isaro.
I was privy to this case. I sat through it, and I heard the evidence. I was privy to the photographs, coroner's photographs, the extent of the injuries, and what have you. And this almost demands that comment be made about this case. It goes without saying that the conduct was horrendous, inhumane, and nothing short of evil. The repeated beatings, burning, starving, binding, shooting Gabriel with BBs that were embedded in different parts of his body, knocking his teeth out with a bat, locking him in a dark cabinet while he's bound, and starving this poor child. It is unimaginable the pain that this child probably endured. And from what I heard, Gabriel was a kind, loving individual who just wanted to be loved. And so, you want to say that the conduct was animalistic, but that would be wrong. Because even animals know how to take care of their young, some to an extent that they will sacrifice their own lives in caring for their young. I remember seeing years ago a report on the news that and this at least sent the point home to me about animals, and there was this cat who had given birth to a litter of cats, and the house wherein the kittens were in was on fire. And that's what I think it made the news, because the fire department was trying to put the fire out, but each time the mother went in to retrieve a kitten, and she would emerge from the house by the scruff, holding the kitten by the scruff, and would manage one by one to bring him or her to safety. And the last time, the house was lost, and the fire department tried to keep this cat from going into the house, but it managed to elude them, went into the house, and they thought, well, she's lost. And I never forgot thinking she made it out of the house. She had the cat by the scruff, except that she was singed and burning her face. But the thing that really struck me was the cat was not blind. The intensity of the heat burned her eyes, but she never let go of that kitten. And so when you want to say, first instinct is to say, you know what, this is animalistic. No, it's beyond animalistic, because animals know how to take care of their young. You know, I can only wish, I really do, that you both, in the middle of the night, you wake up and you think of the injuries that you subjected this poor young man, this poor 7-year-old, and that it tortures you. I rarely say that. It'll be a different type of torture, because you won't be in pain, physical pain. But I'm not sure that you're capable of doing that. But that's my wish.
On June 13th, 2018, Isaro was transferred to San Quentin State Prison to await his execution. Should be noted that California Governor Gavin Newsom placed a moratorium on executions in 2019. There's even a federal court order prohibiting the practice in the state, which has been in place since 2006. The convicted can still be sentenced to death, but actual procedures are currently not being carried out. Many of California's condemned are simply dying of natural causes on death row, which include the likes of Charles Manson and the Night Stalker Richard Ramirez. In the spring of 2021, Isaro Aguirre was transferred to the Richard J. Donovan Correctional Facility in San Diego. On June 21st, 2018, Pearl was transferred to the Central California Women's Facility in Chowchilla. April 8th, 2021, Pearl attempted to be resentenced. She claimed that due to new changes in California law, she wouldn't have been eligible for life without the possibility of parole if she were to be sentenced today. But thankfully, Superior Court Judge George Lomelli was having none of it, and after a careful review concluded that Pearl was not entitled to resentencing relief. According to sources, things haven't been going well for Pearl in prison, as her fellow inmates know exactly what she's done, and she's been getting her comeuppance, something that we surprisingly rarely see happen to perpetrators when we research these stories.
Another thing that's rare to see in the cases that we cover are social service workers being held accountable for their actions when they fail the children they're supposed to be protecting. The social workers in charge of Gabriel's case, Stephanie Rodriguez and Patricia Clement, as well as their supervisors Kevin Baum and Gregory Merritt, stood accused of actually neglecting Gabriel and falsifying public records. In fact, Gabriel wasn't a little boy that simply fell through the cracks. People in his life were well aware of what was taking place with him. Several calls were placed to the CA hotline voicing concerns for Gabriel. In fact, Gabriel showed his injuries to family members, to a security guard at the Los Angeles County Welfare Office, and to mandated reporters at his school. The very first hotline call was placed by Jennifer Garcia, Gabriel's first grade teacher. Jennifer quickly became concerned about the boy's safety after he confessed to getting whipped at home. Jennifer is the same teacher that found the note hidden in Gabriel's desk that read, "I love you, Mom, and Gabriel is a good boy."
She's like, well, sometimes my mom makes me bleed. And I said, well, where do you bleed? And he says, well, on my bottom. Because she hits me with a belt. And he's like, you know that part with the metal on it? He's like, that part.
After Jennifer's call, caseworker Rodriguez was assigned to Gabriel's case, but the violence suffered by the first grader just seemed to be getting worse. Jennifer watched as Gabriel came to her classroom with a fat lip and patches of missing hair, all of which she claimed were inflicted by Pearl. He confessed to her that he'd been repeatedly shot with a BB gun, and as a result, Jennifer kept calling the hotline, except nothing would ever come of her calls. Anytime a social worker would conduct a home visit, they'd only speak with Pearl. They never had eyes on Gabriel, and there was never any medical follow-up. Gabriel should have been brought to a CA medical hub for examination, but he wasn't. Gabriel's great-aunt Elizabeth Carranza called the hotline on 3 separate occasions and tried to get the sheriff's office to intervene twice. Security guard Arturo Miranda Martinez risked the possibility of losing his job to report Gabriel's injuries to a 911 operator. But again, nothing was done. Due to their gross negligence, the social workers and their supervisors were fired and charged with CA and falsifying public records, both of which are felonies and could have landed all parties in prison for 11 years. At trial, Barbara Dixon, the therapist from Hathaway Sycamore's Child and Family Services, who provided in-home counseling services to Gabriel, was granted immunity for her testimony. We'll touch more on Barbara later in our story because Barbara, in my opinion, didn't deserve immunity. As you'll find out later, Gabriel would not be the last child who would die from her negligence. Sadly, the CA charges were dropped in 2020 by California's 2nd District Court of Appeals due to lack of probable cause. Apparently, they felt that failure to uphold their duties and failure to remove Gabriel from his prison did not constitute criminal liability. This is sadly something we see quite often. The fact is that it's not a crime to be shitty at your job, even when the lives of children are on the line. 9 sheriff's deputies were internally disciplined for their failure to properly investigate the allegations of violence against Gabriel. It's unclear if anyone was fired, but no one was held legally liable, even when they tried to interfere with the investigation.
Many in California have done their best to keep Gabriel's name alive. There's a memorial tree standing outside of his East Avenue Q10 apartment complex, which is adorned with pictures of Gabriel, stuffed animals, and candles. Many murals depicting the first grader have popped up in his community, including one in Pacoima where he attended school for 2 years.
Sadly, on September 17, 2014, Gabriel's great-uncle Michael Lemos Carranza passed away. He was only 46 years old and never got to see justice for his sweet nephew. On July 14, 2020, Michael's partner, David Martinez, passed away due to complications from the pandemic. After Michael's death, David had been deported by ICE to his native El Salvador, a country he hadn't lived in for 38 years. According to prosecutor Hatami, he should have been allowed to stay in the U.S. Very, very unfair. David's funeral was held on July 16, 2020. The same day, California's 2nd District Court of Appeals threw out the case against the social workers.
Now, it's clear that the social workers and the sheriff's deputies dodged a bullet here, especially with the public pressure to hold them accountable. And regardless of what you believe their intentions were, you would think child welfare in Los Angeles County would not want this level of heat on them again. After all, the entire country was watching them now. But the next case we're about to cover is going to make you think that none of this could possibly be real. Because LA County had another boy come across their radar whose case looked virtually identical to Gabriel's, right down to the BB gun wounds. You would think that now they would actually take a case like this seriously, but sadly, that's not what happened.
Anthony Nolan Avalos was born on May 4, 2008 in Los Angeles, California. As of the date I'm sharing this story with you all, he should have been approaching his 17th birthday. He was born to parents Heather Maxine Barron and Victor Avalos, who were both teenagers. He was also the big brother to 6 half-siblings. Soon after Anthony was born, Victor, who was a construction worker, had to take off to Mexico. Victor was able to keep in contact through video calls, but Heather had a difficult time making ends meet at her part-time job at a local Subway. She went on to live with Anthony and later his other siblings in a cluttered, chaotic apartment off of Challenger Way in Lancaster, California. According to his aunt, Maria Barron, he was very loving and always wanted to cuddle. He was a hard worker. Dancing was something he always enjoyed. He loved watching football with his Uncle David. He loved the Cowboys. He loved going to the park. He was good at playing video games. He always enjoyed eating papooses when his mama would make them for him. His mother, Heather, didn't have the greatest start in life. She grew up with 2 older siblings named Crystal and David. After her mother, Wendy, left her father when she was just 4, she married a man named Roger Brown, an ex-con she'd been pen pals with when he was still serving his sentence. Wendy told the kids that he had been incarcerated for robbery, but the truth came out soon enough. Now, according to Heather, she and her sisters were repeatedly essayed by their stepfather. You'd think after what she and her sister endured, Heather would have kept her son away from him, but she didn't. Allegedly, Heather would leave Anthony with Roger from time to time. She said she wasn't worried about Anthony's safety because, and these are her words, he preferred girls to boys. As it turned out, she was wrong about that. When Anthony was just 4 years old, his mother brought him to a health clinic after he claimed that someone in the family had been touching him in an inappropriate manner. The visit resulted in the first of many calls to the CA hotline. DCFS records indicated that investigators concluded the incident had occurred, but they did not set up ongoing supervision or counseling after assurances from Anthony's mother that she would find him help and keep him away from the person that was hurting him.
After he turned 6, his aunt Crystal told her therapist that Heather was beating her nephew and locking him in a room with no access to food or a bathroom. Being a mandated reporter, the therapist called the hotline on April 29, 2014 to report what had been shared with her. The call was taken seriously and DCFS became involved. Anthony verified the account to a caseworker who interviewed him at his school. Further interviews revealed that his mother had not gotten him counseling, and due to this, Anthony began acting inappropriately with another child, which experts have found is not uncommon with child victims of SA. Furthermore, his siblings told them that Heather was beating him. Caseworkers believed that there was neglect in the home, and they referred the family to the department's voluntary family maintenance program. Under this program, children can stay with their families while they work to resolve issues. The program is designed for low-risk cases as a means to reduce the number of children in foster care. However, caseworkers placed Anthony into the program even though he was considered a high-risk case. There is often no judicial oversight or an attorney to represent the child's best interests, which is a huge problem. Gabriel Fernandez had actually been placed in this exact same program despite being considered also very high risk. One of the caseworkers assigned to Anthony was Matthew Mansfield, a veteran DCFS supervisor who also played a role in Gabriel's placement in the voluntary program. In Anthony's case, Mansfield and colleague Mark Millman brought in counselors from the Children's Center of the Antelope Valley to provide services for Heather and her kids. This was the same agency that didn't take Gabriel Fernandez's notes seriously. According to counselor Louise Ramirez, based solely on the information provided by Ms. Barron, the assessor believes that her capacity to provide suitable care for her children is severely limited by her poor parenting skills, poor judgment, and denial and lack of awareness of her mental health issues.
Now, according to relatives, Heather had a history of depression, possibly even postpartum. She would have crying spells, complaints of feeling empty and lost, and seemed incapable of connecting with her children. But these weren't just normal blues. Heather had violent bursts of aggression that seemed to be on a hairpin trigger. She would hit the children with whatever object was close by: a wooden spoon, a ping pong paddle, belts, shoes, or a hanger. Allegedly, when confronted by her siblings about the rampant mistreatment of her kids, Heather pretty much told them that what she did to punish her kids was her business. But despite having these types of mental health and emotional issues, Heather continued to have more children. By now, she was 24 with 4 kids, and she was pregnant again.
Caseworkers in Los Angeles County weren't taking what Anthony was going through seriously. They refused to remove him from Heather's care, even after the 6-year-old wrote a note threatening to remove himself from the earth. This is exactly what happened with Gabriel Fernandez. And what's more, there were warning signs that were exactly identical to Gabriel's, such as appearing in school with facial wounds from a BB gun, and finally, after telling his teacher that his mother was hurting him. Wendy Wright, another counselor at the Children's Center who spent significant time with Anthony and his mother, called the hotline on October 14, 2014 to report that Heather grabbed one of Anthony's siblings violently and dragged him across the room. She consistently talked about her children in derogatory terms and displayed nothing but anger towards them. Ms. Wright told the hotline operator that Mark Millman was slow to respond to her phone calls and did not seem to take action when she finally reached him. Her call was later dismissed as unsubstantiated.
The entire time I was there, and I was there twice in the same day because it takes about 2 hours per child. So I was there in the morning, then I came back in the afternoon, and I was there a very long time. I saw nothing but anger towards those children, verbal abuse, emotional abuse. She showed absolutely no affection towards any of them.
Okay.
Even the 2 week, at that time the baby was 2 weeks old. Okay. She seems completely detached.
Shane Bulkley, another DCFS worker who was assigned to investigate Wendy Wright's report, wrote in his notes that Heather cursed, yelled, and acknowledged hitting her kids with a belt. He quoted Mark Millman as saying, "Given the children and their age and their behavior, she is doing all she can." However, both Shane Bulkley and Mark Millman later declined to comment on that particular statement. On November 5th, 2014, yet another therapist at the Children's Center named Crystal Gee called the hotline to report that one of the children told her, "Mommy whoops our asses." Mark Millman did follow up with Ms. Gee, but the conversation was brief at best.
Now, we've mentioned in previous episodes a scoring system that DCFS uses to rate the children that enter their program. The Voluntary Family Maintenance Program was supposed to service low-risk cases, despite Anthony being considered high risk and Gabriel Fernandez as very high. Well, Anthony was evaluated once more and yet again scored high, and a recommendation for increased supervision was given. However, Shane Bulkley and his supervisor overruled the recommendation and closed the investigation, saying they did not have evidence to substantiate the allegations. At the close of 2014, Mark Millman and his supervisor, Matthew Mansfield, took the Children's Center off the case and enlisted a new agency, Hathaway Sycamore's Child and Family Services, which again had provided similar services to Gabriel Fernandez through its counselor, Barbara Dixon. It's unclear why the switch was made, and Crystal Gee considered her removal and its timing to be odd. Now, Barbara Dixon probably wasn't the best fit for Anthony's case either, as she had completely failed Gabriel prior. It should be noted how she talked about her role in Gabriel's case when she testified in court. In 2017, during the criminal case against Gabriel's caseworkers, she claimed she witnessed extensive injuries but withheld the information from the hotline, despite a state law requiring her to report all suspected violence. In exchange for her testimony, she was granted immunity. She was still allowed to keep her job and manage cases of children who clearly were in need of intervention. To no surprise, she was also no help to Anthony. After she was assigned to his case, the focus of Barbara's counseling to reduce the dysfunction in the family was directed at Anthony, not Heather. Her case notes showed that she counseled him to listen to his mother more attentively and to finish his homework. I wonder if she'd tell a battered woman that she wouldn't get hit if she didn't burn dinner. I digress. Barbara's notes spanning from February of 2015 to January of 2016, when Anthony was ages 6 and 7, depicted him as prone to whining, crying, and tantrums, and she said this made parenting him difficult. But Barbara wasn't even taking proper notes to document Anthony's case. For example, some of her notes were cut and pasted from one session to the next, and they did not mention the new allegations that arrived at the hotline during the time she worked with the family. She, of course, has declined to comment on that fact.
In April of 2015, Heather's brother David introduced her to Kareem Ernesto Leyva, a co-worker of his at a Santa Clarita shipping facility. The two began a relationship that would span years and eventually produce more children, but we should talk for a moment about who fathered who in the Baron Leyva household, as it is somewhat confusing. As we mentioned previously, Anthony's father was Victor Avalos. His middle siblings were born to two different fathers, none of whom stuck around. The youngest were all born to Kareem. The family of 10 all lived together in a 3-unit at the Village Point Apartments off of East Avenue K in Lancaster. Within months of their introduction, the father of one of Heather's younger children told police that Kareem was hurting his son. On April 27, 2015, Sheriff's Deputy Elijah Goffigan interviewed the boy, then 2 years old, who told him that his mother's boyfriend had violently grabbed him by the ear, leaving it bruised and cut. The deputy wrote that he saw the wounds himself. But when Sheriff's Detective Chris Wyatt got the report, he made no attempt whatsoever to find Kareem and recommended no charges, and thus ended the investigation. DCFS workers also did not locate and interview Kareem at any point over the 3 years they investigated the family, even though they suspected he was at the home regularly on nights and weekends. They also did not follow the department's rules requiring them to contact his other children or their mothers. If they had, or if they had pulled court records, they would have seen that 2 other women had restraining orders against him after they separately told judges that Kareem beat them with their children present. It was also clear that Kareem hadn't changed his ways because as the relationship progressed, Heather told caseworkers that he began manhandling her as well. DCFS opened a case in dependency court for the sibling, but not for Anthony and the other children in the home. Soon thereafter, one of the assigned DCFS caseworkers, Anna Scortino, saw visible marks and bruises on the sibling's face and left arm, which Heather claimed were due to a fall in the shower. On June 12, 2015, Ms. Scortino called the hotline and stated that she doubted the claim, but wanted it recorded, as she put it, to cover our butts. The case was later closed as unsubstantiated.
Mom says he fell in the shower. Child says he fell in the shower. Dad's freaking out.
Okay. Are you alleging more neglect or alleging more physical abuse by an unknown perpetrator, or
No.
What's our allegation? Would you say? I know you have to put something.
Cover our butt?
I know, to cover.
DCFS guidelines nevertheless required the allegation to be sent to police for a criminal investigation. The assignment went to Sheriff's Deputy Billy Cox, who had been disciplined in the past for failing to properly investigate an unrelated CA allegation. According to Deputy Cox, he never contacted Heather or Kareem. He stated, "It was routine and common practice that if a referral was called in by a social worker that we basically rubber stamped it, so to speak, and sent it through."
By September of 2015, Anthony was enrolled at Lincoln Elementary School in Lancaster, California. In talking with Anthony, Vice Principal Gia Groh had become increasingly concerned. He told Ms. Groh that his mother beat him and locked him in a room with no access to food, water, or a bathroom. He shared that his mother's boyfriend forced him to kneel on uncooked rice and pushed on his knees as he knelt so that he would bleed. He also described what he called the captain's chair, which was a form of discipline that required him to hold a squatted position for a long period of time with his arms outstretched. Appalled by what Anthony shared, she called the hotline on September 18th.
A little boy told me today that he moved out of his home and into his aunt's home. Mm-hmm. He and his brothers and sisters, because his mom was hitting them, locking them up in their room for long hours. Let me look at my notes. Thanking them, putting them to do captain's chairs in the corner.
Okay, what is that, captain's chair?
Captain's chairs, he demonstrated it for me, where he has to put his back up against the wall and kneel down, like bend down.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, it's a thigh strengthening exercise, but it could also be considered like discipline.
Mm-hmm.
If you're making a child do that for a long time.
Okay.
They're hurting their thighs.
Okay. And you said locking them up where?
In their rooms for hours on end. And so the aunt went and took them.
Okay.
And they've now gone to go live with the aunt.
Around the same time, Anthony's uncle, David Barron, heard the same alarming stories from the children during a visit to his home. They told him about being locked in a room, and they said Kareem also ordered the captain's chair punishment. Additionally, the children said that Kareem whipped their faces and legs with a belt and dangled Anthony's younger half-brother upside down from a staircase. When Heather came to pick up her children, David and his wife Maria physically blocked her from taking them and called 911. Sheriff's Deputy Michael Gallardo responded and called the hotline to report what had happened. According to Deputy Gallardo, they seemed pretty shaken up when I talked to them about it.
I went back in and talked with a couple of the kids, and a couple of the kids have told me some things that make me not want to release them right now. I'm not going to release them. Basically, they're saying that the guy Kareem that I referred to earlier, he's been pretty physically abusive to him, hit him with belts in the face, hit him with belts on the leg. He's put him in like a seated squat position against the wall for tons of time on end. He locked him in the bedrooms. Apparently, he held the youngest by his ankles over the flight of stairs, and that wasn't even from, that was from, gave me that information. And I tend to believe the kids. They seem pretty shooken up when I talk to them about it. Mom, at this point, says she's willing to leave them here with brother. Brother is willing to have them stay here.
Okay.
So that's where I'm at.
Okay, so you're leaving them with the brother for how long?
And I guess until you guys come out and do that referral that you guys have open right now, that 5-day referral.
Next day, David called the hotline himself. He told the operator that the children confided that they had been locked in a room for so long that they urinated and defecated on themselves. When their mother's boyfriend got angry, they said he threw dirty diapers at them, slammed them into walls, and dragged one of Anthony's half-brothers by the ear, leaving it scabbed and bruised. He stated that the children were so hungry that they had been hoarding food. When asked how long this had been going on for, the children could be heard in the background responding, 1,000 weeks. David told the hotline worker that Heather was hurting herself around the children and saying that she hates life, and noted that he had pictures of her hurting herself and saying that she wanted to remove herself from the earth. He also told the operator that Kareem was a member of the MS-13 gang and that he was afraid of what he would do next.
He said Kareem dragged him on the floor.
He slammed him to the floor. Like he'd pick him up and throw him on the floor. And
Are they like rough playing, or is he doing this intentionally to cause harm?
He's admitted he doesn't like the kid, so he just treats him like crap just because he doesn't like him, because he's too hyper and stuff. So he locks him in their rooms, and he was grabbing him by his ankles because they have a 2-story house, and he would hang him upside down by his ankles and start shaking him like, "Oh, I'm going to drop you if you don't stop." And I was thinking if he slipped one time, that'd kill the kid. So.
Okay, when did all of this happen?
We just found out about it, but I guess it's been going on for months now. And my sister and him said if they would tell anybody, that they would be in a lot of trouble. And then when I saw the bruises, I asked, what happened, and he told me. So I separated the kids, and I asked each one individually, so that way they couldn't just say the same story. And they all told me the same exact thing. He wouldn't feed them until mommy came home. He would give them cold showers. And then, do you know what an Indian burn is?
No. Is that like a carpet?
No, it's like you grab somebody's arms and you just start twisting your arms back and forth really hard.
Okay.
Yeah. And he was doing that to them also, and then throwing dirty diapers at their heads. And
so your sister and Kareem stated that if they told anyone, they would be in trouble? Yes,
and then after he told us, we let my sister know, like, do you know that Kareem's using your child? And she's like, no, it's not true. And then when she took her home, she kept telling her, you need to say it's not true. And he said, I'm not going to lie, I need to tell the police the truth, because we told her we were going to tell the cops. And so she grounded and locked her in the room and didn't let her come out until the next day.
DCFS caseworker Ikea Vernon met with Anthony at his aunt and uncle's home. He told her everything. He also told her that Heather is my old mom. This is my new house. I am part of the Barron family now. I'm never going to see Heather again. She locks us up in our rooms and makes us starving. Ms. Vernon then called Barbara Dixon and 2 other Hathaway Sycamore's counselors who had been working in the home for 7 months. They were supportive of Heather's parenting during the discussion. According to Ms. Vernon's case notes, each service provider reported they had never heard anything from the children about violence and neglect. Ikea Vernon had just recently joined the department. Her notes indicated that she was unwilling to draw a conclusion based solely on what the children had told her. When David and Maria Barron showed up at the DCFS office for answers about the investigation, Ms. Vernon turned them away and told them they could get information only from Anthony's mother. The couple left unaware that they could have filed a formal petition to ask the court to intervene.
Still in possession of her parental rights, Heather brought her kids home during the last week of September 2015. According to Ikea Vernon, she met with Anthony at Lincoln Elementary, where he shared with her that his mother was starting to be nice and that she does a new thing where she does not lock the bedroom door anymore. A month later, Anthony and his siblings recanted their allegations against Heather and Kareem. In December 2015, Ikea Vernon marked the allegations from Gia Groh, Deputy Gallardo, and David Barron as unsubstantiated. She also used a computer system to score the family's risk, and it once again rated it as high and recommended a greater level of intervention. Ms. Vernon and her supervisor, however, decided against taking any further action. She later stated that her decision relied on the children recanting their prior claims and was unaware that victims often retract their accounts. The following month, Barbara Dixon and Hathaway Sycamores ended their work with the family. But this would not be the last time that DCFS was involved in the Barron-Leyva household. On April 28, 2016, Mildred Blue, a teacher providing services to Heather at a battered women's shelter, reported to the hotline that her children arrived with bruises and said that Kareem had forced them to fight each other at home. They also appeared hungry, with one of the children eating out of the trash. Again, the children denied the allegation when interviewed by DCFS caseworkers, who in turn decided that based on the children's word, there was no need to follow up. Sheriff's Deputy Billy Cox also received a report of Ms. Blue's hotline call. He too decided not to follow up. In doing so, Deputy Cox violated his department's own policy, which requires detectives to conduct independent investigations of CA and not rely solely on DCFS's reports, even if DCFS claims it is unsubstantiated. Near the end of 2016, at least one more call to the hotline arrived regarding Anthony's family, but there were little to no details other than the fact that caseworkers marked it as unsubstantiated once again. Between February 28, 2013 to November 2, 2016, 12 calls were made to the hotline regarding the family, and Anthony and his siblings still remained in their mother's care.
Around this time, Heather cut ties with her brother David, her sister Crystal, her sister-in-law Maria, and the educators who made claims against her. As with many cases we've covered where parents facing multiple accusations of CA end up pulling their kids from school, Heather moved Anthony to El Dorado Elementary, where they had no idea about his prior history as a victim. There, he got to know his new 4th grade teacher, Harmony Bell. Anthony was the fastest runner in his 4th grade class. He earned a place on the honor roll, and his teacher noticed an uncommon emotional maturity for a boy his age. He often collected his thoughts before speaking, asking if he could step out of the room to take a few deep breaths. When a new student joined the class, he asked to move to a neighboring seat, hoping to be the friend the newcomer needed. According to Ms. Bell, Anthony was often nervous about something. He held his Bible tightly throughout the day, once quaking with tears when it fell to the floor. On the last day of school, Anthony wrote a letter. It read, "Dear Mrs. Bell, thank you for teaching me everything you could. It was such a blessing to meet you. I just hope that when I'm going to 6th, that you can come to New Vista so I can see you still. I hope that you can come to my high school, middle school, and college. That way, we will see each other for school years without a problem because how close we are and how we are best buddies, friends. I just want to stay with you forever, but I can't. I just hope you have a good rest of your life because you already know that I'm going to have a good life. Love, Anthony Avalos, your friend." Mrs. Bell wrote in his report card, "Anthony absolutely amazes me. He is so kind and considerate to others. Arrives on time. Keeps a smile on my face all day long. I can't imagine my class without him."
But the summer of 2018 wasn't going to be full of trips to the beach, and Anthony wasn't going to make it to the 6th grade or see Ms. Bell ever again. On June 18th, Anthony allegedly confided to his mother that he liked boys, something that his Aunt Maria would later state took great courage for Anthony to do while living in the home, and only reinforced how brave he was. Heather would later go on to tell a DCFS caseworker that Kareem overheard this conversation. The following night, Kareem dropped Anthony on his head repeatedly. In addition, he was whipped with a belt and a cord, slammed into furniture, starved, had hot sauce poured down his throat, and was not allowed to use the bathroom. On June 20th, 2018, Los Angeles County Sheriff's deputies responded to a 911 call from Heather at about 12:15 in the afternoon. They found Anthony inside the apartment, and he was not responding. The deputies were told that he had suffered injuries from a fall, and paramedics rushed him to the Antelope Valley Hospital in grave condition. Anthony's Aunt Maria learned of Anthony's condition and went to the hospital, where she found Heather in the hallway. When Heather hesitated to let her see her nephew, Maria crouched at her feet on her hands and knees on the linoleum floor to plead with her to please allow her to see Anthony. Through tears, she told Heather she was sorry for reporting her to DCFS, anything that she could do to get inside and see him. When Heather finally relented, Maria found Anthony unconscious and breathing on a ventilator. His lifeless face was held by a large yellow neck brace. Sensors were taped around his skull, recording his diminished brain activity. He was 4 feet 6 inches tall and weighed 77 pounds. His tiny body was covered in cuts, bruises, and cigarette burns. He was so malnourished and dehydrated that his veins were collapsing. They forced emergency personnel to drill into his tibia to administer an IV. He had a brain bleed and had suffered a traumatic brain injury. Due to the results of his injuries, Anthony Nolan Avalos died hours later on June 21st, 2018. He was just 10 years old. Sadly, it took Anthony dying for DCFS to do anything about the horror going on inside his mother's home. As a result, his 6 other siblings were finally removed from Heather's care.
29-year-old Heather Barron and 32-year-old Kareem Leiva were arrested on June 20th, 2018, and charged with 1 count of homicide and 1 count of torture with regard to Anthony, and 1 count of CA in the alleged beating of one of Anthony's younger brothers. Kareem was also charged with an additional count of CA resulting in death. Some sources claim that the 2 were denied bail. Others state they had a bail set at $2 million each. On the day of Anthony's death, Deputy District Attorney Jonathan Hatami and a couple of Sheriff's Department homicide detectives spent 2 hours combing through Heather's apartment, searching for clues. What Prosecutor Hatami saw made the hairs on the back of his neck stand up. They found blood stains on a carpet. They discovered locks on the outside of the children's bedroom doors. There was a leather belt and a bloodied hamper and telltale bottles of hot sauce on the table right next to Anthony's bed. Under a bit of loose carpet in a corner, they discovered a pile of uncooked rice. During her interrogation at the LA County Sheriff's Special Victims Bureau in Lancaster, Prosecutor Hatami said he experienced an overwhelming sense of deja vu. At 5'2", 160 pounds, with black hair pulled back in a tight ponytail, Heather looked like someone he became familiar with 5 years earlier, Pearl Fernandez. There were other similarities as well. Both women were intelligent and highly manipulative, even while being grilled by law enforcement. Heather tried to take control of her own interrogation. She would ask questions instead of answering them. She demanded to know what the investigators knew. She had a calculating way of turning a question over in her mind before she answered back, always insisting that she was the victim. According to Prosecutor Hatami, she was Pearl Fernandez.
The couple were subsequently indicted by a Los Angeles County grand jury in October of 2018. At trial, Anthony's 8-year-old sister and his 7-year-old brother gave a chilling testimony. The brother shared that he was forced to wrestle Anthony until he hurt him, sometimes with his mother and Kareem watching them. He told investigators that the children would have to fight one another to escape punishment, and that eating was a privilege that they had to earn. If they urinated while they were in a locked room, Kareem would push their face into the puddle, and sometimes he would stuff a shirt into their mouths to muffle the screams. The sister shared a similar story. She stated that Kareem would also make the kids beat each other up. She said, "So the boys would be in trouble, so Kareem would have me and my other brother beat up Anthony, or me and Anthony beat up my other brother. Kareem would have us pinch him or sock him." She also shared that they were made to stand in a corner for hours after returning home from school. Sometimes we'd go in the hallway, the little wall between my room and my mom's room. We would have to go there on our knees and carry books, and with 2 weights on top tied all together. We would have to hold it for 10 minutes. If the books fell, she alleged they were made to start over for another hour. She claimed that her mom and Kareem would punish them by making them kneel on rice, and that Kareem sometimes used his foot to put pressure on their knees, causing them to bleed. Afterward, she said she was forced to clean it up. Evidence also showed they were hit with power cords, vacuum tubes, as well as fists. She went on to say that food often was withheld as punishment, and that after the boys were caught sneaking out for food, an alarm was placed on their bedroom door. The boys were also allegedly forbidden from exiting the room to leave the bathroom, which led to further punishment if they soiled themselves. She said that Kareem would hold their legs, make them lay down, and put their face into the urine. Authorities allege that over the last 5 or 6 days of his life, Anthony suffered a slew of punishments, both quick and prolonged. Punishments that, in addition to kneeling on rice for lengthy periods, included having hot sauce poured on his face and mouth and being whipped with a belt on his body, legs, butt, and the bottom of his feet, as well as being repeatedly held upside down and dropped on his head.
On March 6, 2019, a verdict in Heather Barron and Kareem Leiva's trial was reached. The decision was announced by Superior Court Judge Sam Oda the following afternoon. Both were found guilty of first-degree homicide with special circumstances involving infliction of torture.
The court finds defendant Kareem Ernesto Leiva guilty of first-degree murder under a theory of torture murder in violation of Penal Code Section 187, Subdivision A. The court also finds the special circumstance allegation against defendant Leiva pursuant to Penal Code Section 190.2, Subdivision A, Paragraph 18 to be true. The court finds defendant Heather Maxine Barron guilty of first-degree murder under a theory of torture murder in violation of Penal Code Section 187, Subdivision A. The court also finds the special circumstance allegation against defendant Barron pursuant to Penal Code Section 190.2, Subdivision A, Paragraph 18 to be true. On this count, defendant Leiva's guilt is primarily established inter alia through the medical evidence presented in the trial, including trial testimony of doctors, photographic and documentary exhibits, defendant Leiva's own admissions made on September 27, 2018, defendant Leiva's flight from the apartment when 911 was called on June 20, 2018, defendant Leiva's self-infliction of harm to himself, slashing his own neck, observed at his interview on June 27, 2018, the in-court trial testimony of and the various taped interviews ranging from June 20, 2018 to June 28, 2018.
At sentencing 4 years later, Heather and Kareem looked on as several of Anthony's grieving family members delivered emotional victim impact statements.
This brings us to the part that relates to the public, and that is the victim impact statements. So, Tommy, I understand that there are a number of people who wishes to address the court. Is that correct?
I believe there's 11, Your Honor, who would like to speak, and then there's 6 or 7 that they want me to read their statements.
You may begin.
Thank you, Your Honor. We're going to start with the juveniles, Your Honor. The first is first initial of the last name is O, and she's with her family members. She is Anthony's sister. It's okay, honey. You can stand right here. And you could open if you want, or you can read it. Whatever you want. You tell the judge whatever you want to say. And you take your time.
Take your time. It's okay. How about this? Why don't you have other people go so that you can see how it goes?
Thank you, Your Honor.
And then if she wishes to make the statement herself, she could do so.
Thank you, Your Honor.
All right.
You sit there for a little while, okay? And here's the thing, you're making a statement to the judge. That's it. And there's no wrong or right way to do it. It's just your way. And that's okay. That's okay. Whatever way you want to do it is the way you're going to do it. You want to talk? Okay. You, first initial of the last name is D, Your Honor. Anthony's cousin, correct? Yes. And you can hold this if you want, and Maria can help you too. No, you want to hold it? Okay, don't hold it. And you see the judge, he's up there, and you can tell the judge wherever you want, okay?
have his paper that you have?
Oh, I do.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
You mean he doesn't have it memorized?
I could read the paper.
Is that yours?
Okay.
Okay. Okay.
Dear Judge, my name is. I am 8 years old and I miss my cousin Anthony. I was a baby when I last saw him. I wish I could remember all our time together, but all I have is pictures and stories that my family tells me. Anthony was an amazing company, full of life and love. He always played with me and made me laugh. I have family and I have a video that I like to play over and over of him making me laugh when I was little. We will never get to see Anthony grow up. I will never get to play with my older cousin. He will get to teach me how to play baseball or play catch with him. Heather, who's supposed to be my aunt, took Anthony away from us. Heather is an evil monster and she deserves to spend the rest of her life in prison. I don't forgive Heather for taking my cousin's life, and I hope she gets beat up in jail because I just wanted to meet Anthony. I hope Heather has a horrible life. Anthony is in a better place, and someday we'll be together again, and we will be able to make new memories. I always carry you in my heart, Anthony. Love you and miss you very much. Thank you for your time on here.
Thank you.
It has been 5 long years without my brother, my best friend, and my whole world, Anthony Avalos. Anthony was everything to me and my family. Anthony was a ball of sunshine to everyone, and sadly, because of these two monsters, he is not here anymore. Anthony did not deserve any other things that happened to him, nor me. And I am a 13-year-old girl. I should not have to be here doing all this. I should be able to live a normal life. They both took away my ability to live a normal life as a normal girl. Sometimes I wish I could turn back time and speak up to anyone, but I can't.
Where's she at? Sometimes I wish that I could turn back time and speak up to a teacher. Or anyone at least. But I can't. I wish that Maria never introduced Kareem to you or us. Heather, you and Kareem ruined not only Anthony's life, but mine, Bella's, Noah's, David's, Priscilla's, Evelyn's, and even your own lives. You decided to choose and live, decided to choose and live a man over us, your own children. You decided to let that horrible man into our lives, and that ruined everything. You stopped loving and protecting us, and that hurts a lot. Kareem, you came into our life and ruined everything. I don't know why you did it, but you did. You tortured us and hurt us very badly. If it wasn't for you, Anthony would still be here, and none of us would have to be here doing this. It is also because of Heather that Anthony is not here anymore. She did not do her job as a mother. She did not protect us and took part in the torture. I would have never thought in a million years that I would have wanted to call my own mother Mom. To me, you are both monsters, and Heather, you are not my mother nor family. If I knew that the abuse would have ended with me losing my brother, I would have said something. But I didn't because I was not scared, but because I was scared and terrified. But I am not anymore because this is all finally coming to an end and you both will get what has been waiting for you. I have learned to accept that you guys can't hurt me anymore. I'm finally free from all the torture and but if I were to have known that this would end with me losing a brother, I would do it all over again with just one difference. That it would be me, not Anthony. Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you.
And what about Barbara Dixon? Well, the California State Board of Behavioral Sciences placed Barbara Dixon on 4 years of probation. She faced charges of gross negligence and unprofessional conduct by the licensing board, but sadly, those charges were dropped. Her probation went into effect on March 31st, 2022. This means that in 2026, Barbara Dixon is free to fail children in Los Angeles once more.
On April 25th, 2023, Heather Maxine Barron and Kareem Ernesto Leiva were sentenced to life in prison. Both were denied probation and ordered to pay $7,500 in victims' compensation funds. They had initially faced the death penalty, but Los Angeles County District Attorney George Gascon had said his office would no longer seek capital punishment after he won his 2020 election. In addition, Anthony's father, Victor, and his siblings received a settlement of $32 million in damages from Los Angeles County. Heather is currently being housed at the Central California Women's Facility in Chowchilla, the same location that houses Pearl Fernandez, while Kareem is being held at the Mule Creek State Prison in Ione. It should also be noted that in the wake of Anthony's death, his family, along with prosecutor Jonathan Hatami, held protests with the intention to oust DA Gascon due to his inability to put victims and their families first. Protests were held in Sam Yellen Park in Palmdale, as well as Schooner Patio Grill in Lancaster. In addition to Anthony's family and prosecutor Hatami, the family of Gabriel Fernandez was also in attendance. Anthony's funeral service was held at St. Junipero Serra Parish in Quartz Hills, California on July 20th, 2018. His father, Victor, served as a pallbearer. He was laid to rest in a small blue casket at the Good Shepherd Catholic Cemetery in Lancaster, California. His headstone, engraved with the image of a sleeping angel, bore the inscription, "You don't have to have superpowers to be a superhero."
Now, you would think this would be the end of the video. Surely LA County couldn't let this happen again, right? But it didn't take long before they did let it happen again. And despite a mountain of evidence and the incredible work from one social worker who tried her very best to save this next boy's life, LA County was content to let him die. And as a further insult, remove the social worker from the case, the only person who was trying to save his life. After everything that happened with Gabriel Fernandez and Anthony Avalos, it's reasonable for you to believe that this just couldn't happen again, especially in such a short span of time. But what you're about to find out is that it is far more horrifying than that. Noah Alejandro Cuarto was born on August 20th, 2014 in Palmdale, California, to parents Ursula Elaine Juarez and Jose Maria Cuarto Jr. The pair met at John F. Kennedy High School in Grenada Hills and had their first son when Ursula was 18 years old. Noah was born 2 years later, followed by a daughter and another son. From very early on, the couple had already racked up a long history with social services. In fact, LA County DCFS had their eyes on the family before Noah was even born. In 2014, Ursula was accused of harming her infant half-sister, causing skull fractures. Oftentimes, skull fractures in infants and toddlers point to shaken baby syndrome. DCFS social worker Jennifer Montano wasn't going to allow Ursula to have another opportunity to harm another child. She launched a full investigation and knew that Ursula was pregnant again. As such, she arranged to have Noah taken away from his parents as soon as he was born.
During the first few weeks of his life, Noah bounced from foster home to foster home and never formed the bond that newborns have with their mothers. Later, it became obvious that Ursula didn't develop any motherly feelings towards her son. However, she was already accused of harming her half-sister, so there was a very good possibility that she would have hurt Noah even if the two had bonded. After a few weeks of bouncing around in the foster care system, Noah was placed in the temporary custody of his great-grandmother, Evangelina Hernandez, who he would go on to stay with for 9 months. She was a capable, responsible, and loving caregiver. Noah formed perhaps the most enduring bond of his entire life while staying with Evangelina, sometimes calling his great-grandmother Mommy. Evangelina was getting him to all his doctor's appointments and kept him clean and well-fed. She made sure he had plenty of age-appropriate toys and enriching activities throughout the day. Noah was thriving in her care.
However, like many of the narcissistic parents we cover, Ursula and Jose wanted nothing more than to sabotage their son's life. They felt that DCFS had robbed them of the first months of caring for their son. When DCFS couldn't find concrete proof that Ursula was responsible for her half-sister's skull fracture, the investigation was determined to be inconclusive and Noah was returned to his parents. Evangelina Hernandez expressed concerns about the reunification between Noah and his parents. His great-grandmother didn't feel like they were ready to take care of their son, but her concerns didn't seem to count for much. So one would think that once Ursula and Jose got their son back, all would be sunshine and daisies, right? It wouldn't be long before the family was back on the DCFS radar.
In November of 2016, when Noah was just a little over 2 years old, Kaiser Permanente called DCFS to let them know that Noah had missed his last 8 doctor's appointments. In fact, these 8 appointments were missed over the course of 6 months. Because of Noah's young age and his history with DCFS, it was really important that he was being seen by a doctor. This isn't just important for at-risk children. Babies and toddlers need to reach a lot of developmental milestones. If Noah wasn't showing up for his doctor's appointments, there was no way for professionals to monitor his progress. Ursula claimed it was an issue with the family's insurance, but that was quickly proven to be a lie. A social worker verified Noah always had medical coverage. It had never lapsed. And again, DCFS had to intervene. When they visited the family's home to investigate, they found that Noah was so weak and malnourished that he couldn't even walk, which placed him in the first percentile for boys his age. At 2 years old, he weighed just 17 pounds. The average weight for a 2-year-old boy should be between 27 and 30 pounds. He was almost half that. Jennifer Montano said that he appeared very thin. His eyes were hollow. Again, if Noah had been going to his regular doctor's appointments, this would have been a non-issue. Ursula and Jose had hidden the little boy for a reason. Ursula said Noah ate too much, which made him vomit and thus not gain weight. She explained that he was a troublemaker and would run around the house eating everything until he couldn't take any more and threw up.
Once again, Noah was removed from his parents' custody. This time, he was placed in a treatment center called Matthias House in the San Gabriel Valley. There, the goal was to restore his health, which is exactly what happened. Noah didn't have any of the issues his parents claimed, such as vomiting or naughty behavior. The administrator at Matthias House, Michelle Thompson, said he was not quite caught up, but almost there. He was running around. He was sliding on the slide. He would call himself No-No. Afterward, Noah was returned to the care of his great-grandmother, Evangelina. During this time, the two lit up each other's lives. By now, Noah was walking, talking, and singing. His favorite song was Old MacDonald. He loved cuddles and would hug his great-grandmother and say, "You know what time it is, Grandma? It's time for you to hold me and tell me you love me." Even though Evangelina once again had temporary custody of Noah, his parents were granted visitation. They were allowed to take him for a few hours at a time, which broke Evangelina's heart. Noah would scream and cry for up to 45 minutes before and after each visit and kept telling her that he didn't want to go. It didn't even really seem like Ursula and Jose were that enthusiastic about being with their son either. The couple never made their son a priority. Oftentimes they bailed on visitation, much to Noah's benefit. But when it came to the DCFS investigations against them, The couple made it seem like they really wanted Noah back and fought to get their way.
In 2017, the DCFS investigation that had Noah removed for the second time lasted a year and a half. Noah would be returned to his parents, but Ursula and Jose were given stipulations, including enrolling Noah in daycare and therapy. He needed to show up at his doctor's appointments, and the couple needed to complete a parenting program with a focus on parent-child bonding. All of this would be arranged with the help of DCFS, and they would have a specific social worker to help them oversee the process. Since Evangelina no longer had legal custody, all she could do was stand by her great-grandson and try to advocate for him. There were a lot of new social workers coming in and out of the picture, so she made it her duty to make sure they were all informed about what was really going on with Noah. Eventually, DCFS social worker Susan Johnson was assigned to Noah's case. She was the person who fought harder for the boy than anybody else. Her job as a continuing services child social worker required her to oversee the reunification of the family and report back to the courts. Her colleagues had warned her that Ursula and Jose were manipulators and proven liars. Ms. Johnson read through all of Noah's case files and made it a point to listen to the concerns of Evangelina, who, at this point, felt pretty dismissed by the system. In addition, Ms. Johnson made a number of visits to the family home where she was able to make contact with Noah. Ms. Johnson expressed a lot of concern regarding Noah. He seemed to exhibit telltale signs of CA and neglect. She noticed this in some of the other children as well, but no one really seemed to be as bad off as Noah. Ms. Johnson was worried that Noah was being used as a scapegoat in his family. According to psychologists, some families will adopt the method of a scapegoat to cope with their dysfunctional families, whether it's consciously or subconsciously. They will sometimes choose one member of the family to inherit all of the blame for their problems. Anything bad that happens within the family is assigned to one of the children, and they take the biggest punishment, mentally and physically.
Several months into the reunification plan, Ursula and Jose failed to enroll Noah in therapy or daycare. They never completed the parenting classes they were supposed to take. In fact, they ignored everything the court was requiring them to do. Noah was never placed in therapy or daycare, and he was telling family members and social workers that he didn't want to be with his parents. Despite Ursula and Jose's unwillingness to cooperate, the courts decided to keep moving forward with the reunification plan. Ms. Johnson told the court that Ursula and Jose had lied to her multiple times. They continually lied about obtaining medical insurance, and they still weren't getting Noah medical attention that he needed. Ursula even lied about being pregnant. She denied 2 pregnancies only to give birth both times. Allegedly, Ursula tried to sneak out of the hospital with her baby because she knew that DCFS was going to be called and that would open a new investigation. Susan Johnson would try to make unannounced home visits to the family, but most of the time, they wouldn't answer the door. They would make excuses such as claiming that they weren't home at the time. It was impossible for Susan to enter the home, and she didn't have an official warrant.
By the spring of 2019, when Noah was 4 years old, his life hadn't gotten any better. He was no closer to a normal childhood, and the few advocates he had looking out for him seemed to be meeting constant obstacles in their way. In March of 2019, Ms. Johnson showed up at the address Ursula and Jose claimed to live at, only to find they didn't actually live there. Jose's sister answered the door instead. She said her brother and his kids had not lived there for at least 4 months. Jose's mother, Nubia Barrios, said the family occasionally stayed there and confessed to being worried about her grandkids. Noah was always hungry, according to Ms. Barrios, who also worried about her grandchildren not being in school. In March of 2019, Noah's aunt, Maggie Hernandez, called the hotline to report a troubling conversation that she had with Noah. In this conversation, Noah told her some things that led her to believe that he was not only the victim of CA, but SA as well. She said that it wasn't just this conversation that made her think that he was experiencing SA, but also a change in his entire personality. His demeanor was completely different. During an overnight stay, Noah had night terrors and complained that his butt was hurting him. Above all, Noah was changing from an exuberant boy to quite a fearful one. She said she was very worried that nobody else would be willing to advocate for him. Susan Johnson learned about this report as well. When she read it, she immediately paid a visit to the home to investigate. What she found on this visit was the last straw for her. Noah's arms and neck were covered in bruises, and his back was completely lathered in some thick white cream. Ursula tried to explain that the bruising on his neck and upper arms was just because Noah was clumsy. She also said that the cream on his back was for eczema. This visit raised every red flag, and Ms. Johnson immediately shared the information with her superiors. She told them about his extensive bruising and that it seemed like Noah was being coached about what was happening to him. He told Ms. Johnson that he was being hit, but then later recanted his statement, which is something often seen in victims of CA and DV, and something we saw with Anthony Avalos before him. His parents had also been given countless opportunities to give him medical attention and enroll him in school and therapy, which they were court-ordered to do. However, they were not doing anything to help Noah, and his condition was only getting worse. Ms. Johnson argued that Noah needed to be taken away from his parents for a third time, but when she brought this up, she was told that she needed a warrant, which wasn't going to be easy to obtain. It seemed that her superiors were not paying much attention to her concerns. The only thing Susan could do was file a report and let investigators look into the case.
However, as we've seen in other cases, such as that of Gabriel Fernandez and Anthony Avalos, as soon as investigators got involved, a new caseworker is brought in to take the lead on the case. This new caseworker was Maggie Vasquez Ducos. As soon as she entered the picture, she started to undo all of Ms. Johnson's work. She did not read any of Noah's reports. The very first time she showed up at the residence, she found a smiling Ursula and Noah covered in bruises. Ursula and Jose immediately began explaining that he had fallen from his bunk bed. Ms. Ducos believed them right away. They went on to explain how the previous social worker, Susan Johnson, and the rest of DCFS were out to get them. They told her they were being targeted due to racism and that DCFS had already done enough to break her family apart. Ursula also said, "Why would we hurt our baby when we just got him back? I've had this case open for 4 years, and I have been told I'm good enough to only have my 2 kids, but not Noah. How does that make sense?" It didn't take much to fool Miss Ducos into believing that they were honest. When she talked to Noah, he denied any claims of CA or SA. As such, she decided that none of the previous reports were truthful either and closed her investigation as inconclusive.
At the same time, Susan Johnson still hadn't given up on Noah and was desperately working to get him out of his toxic household. She filed a complaint with the courts, resulting in a petition to remove Noah from his parents' custody for a third time. She also followed through on her superior's challenge to get the warrant. The juvenile court granted the order to remove Noah and have him examined to determine if SA had occurred. The petition was signed by a juvenile court judge in the early summer of 2019. When her superiors heard that she had actually gone ahead to obtain the warrant to remove him from the household, they called their own emergency meeting, where Susan Johnson, Maggie Vasquez Ducos, and DCFS leaders discussed Noah's case and whether or not they were going to follow through. Ms. Johnson later recalled trying to advocate for Noah in this meeting. She tried to warn everyone that if they didn't act on this court order, they could have a dead kid on their hands. One of the members told Ms. Johnson to stop talking, while Ms. Ducos said she believed the boy was fine and that there was nothing, absolutely nothing, wrong with the family. Ms. Ducos also accused Ms. Johnson of siding with Evangelina Hernandez in an attempt to sabotage the family and keep them away from Noah. She also said that she was concerned that if DCFS had any more involvement, they would be guilty of discrimination due to Ursula and Jose being Latino. Despite there being an active court order to remove Noah from his parents' custody, no one ever followed through with it. Ms. Ducos, her superiors, and DCFS decided they needed to conduct a more thorough investigation before they could justify such drastic measures as removing Noah for a third time. At this point, Susan Johnson is completely removed from the case. Maggie Vasquez Ducos and another social worker are once again assigned. Social workers have 10 days to take children from their homes after a commissioner issues a removal order. Otherwise, they must alert the court they don't plan to do so. But by mid-June, 29 days had passed, and no one ever told the juvenile court that he remained with his parents.
In the summer of 2019, the Cuartos were living in an apartment in Palmdale, California. Now, around this time, Maggie Vasquez Ducos and other social workers paid visits to their apartment. They found Noah with a cut across his face. Ursula and Jose provided 3 different explanations for how Noah received this injury. Allegedly, Noah came running up to them a number of times to announce things like, "They gave me lots of food and they take good care of me." These were obvious signs that Noah had been coached to cover up what his parents were doing. After these visits, Ms. Ducos reported to the courts that she still needed more time and was granted an additional 30 days to investigate the case. She emailed her supervisors saying that even though it was court-ordered, Noah didn't need an examination because there were no reports of SA. Ms. Ducos tried to visit the family several more times but was denied and verbally attacked by Jose and Ursula. Despite being Latina herself, they claimed that she was racist and wanted to take their child. Still, Ms. Ducos kept defending them. She went on to claim that they were just overwhelmed by their previous experiences with social services.
Sometime on July 5th, 2019, a neighbor at the Mountain Shadows Apartments in Palmdale walked by the family apartment and heard a child's cries, "No, Daddy, no, Mommy." Just after 6 p.m., 911 dispatchers received a call from the Palmdale apartment complex. It was Ursula. She told the dispatcher that they needed an ambulance and that her son Noah had been found unresponsive in the pool. Allegedly, according to her, the 4-year-old had been swimming in the pool and drowned as a result of a terrible accident. She said that they were trying to revive him but were unsuccessful. When the paramedics arrived on the scene, their story did not add up. Noah was fully clothed and he was completely dry. He didn't look like a boy that was just pulled from a pool. Noah was taken to the hospital, first at the Palmdale Regional Medical Center and later at Children's Hospital Los Angeles. No family members made it to Noah's bedside. Dr. John Markham, who treated Noah, said he joined a group of doctors and nurses who held the boy's hands in his final moments. He said, "We were with him as he left the earth." And Noah Cuarto was pronounced dead the following morning. He was 1 month shy of his 5th birthday.
Noah's body revealed clues that were inconsistent with an accidental drowning, and a medical examiner would later find that he didn't have any water in his lungs. In fact, his autopsy reported bruising all over his body. He had multiple broken ribs that were in various stages of healing, pointing to prolonged chronic beatings. The autopsy also revealed undeniable evidence of SA. They found trauma to Noah's rectum but could not determine what had caused it. Noah was killed by means of extensive torture. Noah's cause of death was strangulation and blunt force trauma, and the manner of death, a homicide. Police had their eyes on only one pair of suspects.
Now to an Eyewitness News investigation, new video and frantic calls to 911 after the death of 4-year-old Noah Cuarto last summer. Noah's parents told police the boy drowned in a swimming pool, but according to grand jury testimony just released, the parents staged a scene to derail investigators. Our Gabriel Fernandez has the story you're seeing first on Eyewitness News.
You're gonna have to go faster. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8.
6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 1. The 911 call. 4-year-old Noah Cuarto unconscious on the living room floor. His parents telling first responders they had just pulled him from the swimming pool.
We brought him upstairs because we were trying to get him. We were trying to think like maybe he'll wake up.
Where are you at right now?
His head is that way.
Where?
Right
in
here.
the house.
In the house, yeah, in the house.
We're in the house.
In the living room.
Okay, so you're in the living room.
And I laid down.
Noah's father, Jose Cuarto, reenacting his desperate CPR attempts at their Palmdale apartment on July 5th last year.
And I was just like, Noah, come on, son, please, breathe.
Their story soon unraveled. Jose Cuarto and Noah's mother, Ursula Juarez, are charged with the torture and murder of Noah. The case has the Department of Children and Family Services under fire too. Just 8 weeks before Noah's death, a DCFS worker, Susan Johnson, had obtained a judge's order to remove Noah from his home, but Johnson's supervisors intervened. Noah died in a home DCFS itself had deemed high risk. A deputy responding to the 911 call describes how in the hospital the parents' lies were exposed.
He was transported to the hospital, no signs of drowning at all, no water in the lungs, but there's signs of physical infection.
What doctors and the coroner did find were bruises all over, healing rib fractures, brain swelling, and injuries consistent with sexual assault. Cause of death, asphyxiation, and blunt force trauma.
It's looking like there's some sort of like strangulation of some sort and sodomization.
Noah and his siblings had been in and out of foster care. Prosecutors allege Jose Cuarto targeted Noah, believing the boy was not his son. That at age 2, back with the parents, Noah weighed 17 pounds and could not walk on his own. Noah's mother sent a chilling text message. Almost killed him so many times. I had to do CPR for him to wake up and stay alive, right? A check of security cameras at the pool showed no sign of Noah or his family that day. And about the frantic effort to revive Noah, there's evidence that Noah was unconscious hours before the parents called 911.
The day after Noah's death, Ursula and Jose were both arrested and his remaining siblings were put into protective custody. Both Ursula and Jose were charged with CA and homicide. Bail was set at $4 million for Jose and $3 million for Ursula. Their case was brought to a grand jury in 2020. The two of them were indicted on counts of homicide and torture, and Jose was charged with essay against a minor resulting in death. If convicted as charged, Jose faced a possible maximum sentence of 47 years to life in state prison, and Ursula faced up to 32 years. As we mentioned previously, the death penalty was off the table thanks to Los Angeles County District Attorney George Gascon, who didn't do any favors for Anthony Avalos either. In 2020, Evangelina Hernandez filed a wrongful death lawsuit on behalf of herself and Noah's surviving siblings. It stated that instead of protecting Noah and his siblings, DCFS continued to place the children with their violent parents, where the children continued to be mistreated over the course of several years. It also claimed that after Noah's death, DCFS social workers made threats against Evangelina in an attempt to silence her. They told her that if she made any public statements about Noah's case and her potential lawsuits, she would lose her request for guardianship of her other 3 great-grandchildren and would never see them again. They actually said this to her. The lawsuit was settled in December of 2024, but the details of the settlement have not been made public. Hathaway Sycamore's Child and Family Services, who you'll also remember from the Anthony Avalos case, was named as an additional defendant. The agency knew of, or suspected, the misconduct occurring in Noah's home after the boy was sent to them by DCFS for mental health services, but failed to report the misconduct. In February of 2023, social worker Lisbeth Hernandez Avalos testified that a property manager at the family's apartment told her that he had heard crying coming from inside and suspected DV going on. The social worker also testified that the children all slept on one mattress in the living room, and that the home was filthy and emanated a foul odor. On March 29, 2024, both Ursula Juarez and Jose Cuarto Jr. pled no contest to their charges, which included 1 count each of first-degree murder and torture for Jose, and 1 count each of second-degree murder and torture for Ursula. On April 30, 2024, Superior Court Judge Robert Chu sentenced Jose to 32 years to life in prison, and Ursula to 22 years to life. As part of their plea deal, the disgraced parents waived their appellate rights. At the hearing, great-grandmother Evangelina told the couple, "Why, my God, why is there such evil in you, Ursula? What kind of monster are you, Jose? You're both very sick. You are the worst kind of sickos." As of the date of this recording in December of 2024, Ursula is currently being housed at the Central California Women's Facility in Chowchilla, alongside Pearl Hernandez and Heather Barron, while Jose is being held at the Substance Abuse Treatment Facility and State Prison in Corcoran. It should be noted, out of all 3 of those cases that we've just covered, this case is the only one where the parents did not get life in prison.
In the wake of Noah's death, Deputy District Attorney Jonathan Hatami summoned several DCF staffers who worked on Noah's case, including Maggie Vasquez Ducos and her supervisor. Both acknowledged they had not actually read Susan Johnson's 26-page filing to the juvenile court to remove Noah, despite opposing it. Stunned, the prosecutor asked Ms. Ducos, "You're telling this jury that you decided not to follow the removal order that you never read. Is that accurate?" She said she had, but then further explained that she read it after Noah passed away. None of the high-ranking DCF administrators testified. Noah Alejandro Cuarto was laid to rest at the San Fernando Mission Cemetery in Mission Hills, California. During a private service, loved ones remembered the little boy who loved Spider-Man, ponies, and PJ Masks, and was excited about starting school. Allegedly, his beloved great-grandmother Evangelina was banned from attending his funeral. His gravestone, decorated with the little boy's picture and a guitar, bore the inscription, "A hug, a kiss in heaven's bliss, gone too soon, our baby."
So why did this happen? Why were claims made for change and nothing happened as a result? What other cases do we not know about? Because these cannot be the only ones. What if the reporter gave into the immense pressure to stop and decided not to dig into Gabriel's case? Would we have known about any of these boys? If you've seen the Netflix documentary, The Trials of Gabriel Fernandez, I think we have a good idea what the answer is, because before Gabriel's case was blown wide open by the LA Times, he was little more than a blurb in the homicide docket. He was swept under the rug like some sort of statistic, and nobody cared about him outside of those that actually knew him. And sadly, this is the fate of many children that die at the hands of their violent parents or caregivers. Cases where those meant to protect them want to turn a blind eye and pretend it didn't happen on their watch. Governing bodies who overload caseworkers, or in the case of Susan Johnson, punish those for doing what's in the best interest of children. Given what we've seen with these 3 cases, it is likely that there are other children just like them who were never reported on. Until massive change happens in LA County, there will be more Gabriels, more Anthonys, and more Noahs.